Tanse, good evening. I'm Krisan Ashkate. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. Prime Minister Mark Carney met with Inuit leaders in the Northwest Territories on Thursday to discuss the controversial Bill C-5, also known as the One Canadian Economy Act. Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami President Nathan Obed says he was reassured the law will not violate modern treaties. APTN Sav Jones has more.
Inuit leaders had a lot to discuss during a meeting with Prime Minister Mark Carney early Thursday. Along with the One Canadian Economy Act, or Bill C-5, the Inuit Crown Partnership Committee has identified 14 priority areas they want to work on with Canada.
Whether it be the Child First Initiative, the ongoing housing crisis, and the necessary actions to resolve it, the work that still needs to be done on education and on language and infrastructure. All of these things I hope we can have fulsome conversations about today.
Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami President Nathan Obed co-chaired the meeting, saying having it so soon after the federal election shows the government's willingness to work with Inuit. Going in with a third of his cabinet to discuss Bill C-5, Carney said it was a charged agenda.
This opportunity to build major projects, nation-building projects across Inuit Nunavut, across the Northwest Territories, across Canada, in partnership. So that will be the core of our discussions today. But as well, we'll address issues around Arctic security, defense, and education, health, social services for our people.
C-5 has been widely controversial throughout Canada, with fears that it threatens Indigenous sovereignty. But after the meeting, Obed said he felt reassured the bill will not violate modern treaties.
I'm really optimistic about the ability for Canada to respect our agreements in this implementation phase of Bill C-5. But still, these are early days, and we look forward to the conversations ahead.
Northern and Arctic Affairs Minister Rebecca Chartrand shared what was said to calm Obed's fears.
What we told Nathan Obed is that these processes have already been established. So when we look at the modern treaties, we know that we have to abide by the regulatory and the environmental assessments, and that's what we're going to do.
Virginia Mearns, an Inuk from Nunavut, was also announced as the new Arctic ambassador. Obed said he personally recommended her for the role and is very pleased with her appointment. Sav Jones, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
And stay tuned for Dennis Ward's one-on-one interview with Prime Minister Mark Carney later in the show. 3 miners in BC are currently trapped a half a kilometer underground after 2 cave-ins happened at the Red Chris mine on Tuesday. The mine is located in a remote area in northwestern BC. The names of the miners have not been released, but 2 are from BC and the other is from Ontario, and all 3 were there for contract work. The 3 men were able to make it to a safety chamber that has enough food, water, and oxygen for 16 people. They are reportedly uninjured. However, communication with the miners stopped yesterday. Rescue teams are on site developing plans on how best to restore communication and free the miners. Red Chris Mine opened in 2015 and is a gold and copper mine located in the traditional territory of the N.W.T Nation in northern BC. Premier David Eby spoke about the current efforts to rescue the miners.
BC miners are the best in the world. Our rescue teams are exceptional, and they will be working overtime to bring these workers home safely to their families. Obviously, it's very concerning for the families, for the workers in the sector, and all British Columbians and Canadians. And our thoughts are with the families and an appreciation with the incredibly brave rescue teams that are working right now.
As the United States continues to impose tariffs on Canada and Mexico, a First Nation in southern Saskatchewan is working to protect Indigenous trade. North American leaders are meeting this week to discuss how to keep trade moving. APTN video journalist Rachel May spoke with Chief Roger Redmond, who is currently in Mexico promoting an Indigenous trade model.
We're exercising our sovereignty and implementing it and operationalizing it through mechanisms that that we've always had as Dakota people, as Indian people.
Standing Buffalo Dakota Nation Chief Roger Redman is in Mexico to announce the Standing Buffalo Economic Corridor Initiative. He is at the Commission for Environmental Cooperation, or CEC, to seek recognition from world leaders to move his initiative forward. The CEC is hosting a public forum in Mexico City from July 24th to 25th. The CEC brings together Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. to address environmental issues and avoid conflict between trade and environmental policies.
Operationalizing using existing legislation, international legislation, on incorporating and revitalizing ancient trade routes.
The initiative is a First Nations-led plan to promote trade, protect the environment, and build infrastructure through partnerships with Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. It will reconnect the historic Oceti-Sakowee trade network that once linked the Mississippi Basin to the Canadian Rockies. It also includes creating the Dakota-Lakota Cross-Border Trade Authority to issue licenses, verify goods, and network with all governments.
So we have mechanisms in place on how everybody would collectively benefit from that. So we've given the province notice, we've given some of the industry players notice that we have our own consultation framework and our own legislative authority stemming from our traditional governance systems. And the trade route is one of them.
Chief Redman says a Sovereign Alliance consultation will set legal rules for project approvals, cultural reviews, and monitoring. The nation presented the Economic Corridor Initiative to Canadian Environment Minister Julie DeBrusin, U.S. EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, and Mexico's Environment Secretary Alicia Barcena. Redman says the initiative is made in good faith, stressing that First Nations-led environmental law is key to North America's future in climate, conservation, and trade.
We work together, we stick together, we're stronger. So when one nation succeeds, we all succeed.
Rachel May, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
As we mentioned yesterday, our Dennis Ward is in the Northwest Territories, where he had a one-on-one interview with Prime Minister Mark Carney in Carney's hometown of Fort Smith. It is the first time APTN National News has sat down with a Prime Minister since Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in June of 2016. Here is part one of that interview with Dennis and the Prime Minister.
You're doing this for us. It took a while. We were trying to get you before the Liberal leadership, but here we are in your hometown. What's it like to be back?
Well, it's great. It's always great to go home, and pleasure to be in Fort Smith any time of the year. Last time I was here was 2009, I think. It was just after. It was during the financial crisis, and it was probably during March or so. So it wasn't green like this, but it's great to be back. And we've got a lot on, and that time was a time of crisis and Canada getting through that. We've got a different set of challenges now that are coming again from outside of our borders, and we've got a lot of options to address it and build out, and that's part of why I'm here.
Well, you made a couple of stops today, one at the community center.
Yep.
I believe her name was Connie, greeted you with a sign saying, "We love you, Mark, but you scrap Bill C-5." Is that something you've been hearing a lot?
No, actually. It was nice of Connie to come out with a sign with a couple of people, but no, I haven't heard a lot, and we spent last week, well, a couple of things. One, last week met with physically over 250 First Nations chiefs, Grand Chiefs.
In particular, after Alberta said
virtually,
they would do their own
more
provincial assessment.
there, another
First
50,
Nations
75,
Summit
I guess,
currently
as
taking
well,
place
to talk through the beginnings of the
Alberta,
approach going forward, what C5 does. And all it does at this stage is it makes things possible. The question is, what do we want to do? What do we want to do together? And we started, the first thing we did in the question of what do we want to do together is meeting with Indigenous leadership. I'm going to, as you know, I'm going to Inuvik later today, and we'll be meeting with all the leadership of Inuit Nunagat, the rights holders, modern treaty leadership, to talk about what's possible. What they want to do. And I think that's the important point. Sometimes you need to create the conditions, and that's what we've done, is to create the conditions for possibilities. And then the question is, what are people for It's a big country. We've got lots of opportunity, and the question of which of those do we want to pursue?
I guess depending on who you were listening to, the First Nation Summit has been panned a little. Some walked out. The youth couldn't make it in. Some were saying, ministers were the ones doing all the talking. I guess what is your take on how the summit went?
It went very well, and I will tell you that the number of rights holders, the number of Grand Chiefs that came directly to me with specific proposals that have followed up with us on specific ideas is immense. And again, we're going to focus where people want to do things,
right,
where people are for. Understand that look, and it's true, Dennis, in any time. There are projects that seem good to some people but are bad for others, or projects that aren't ready, or ideas that aren't fully developed. And it's really going to be around what are people really enthusiastic and what helps to build nations. And when I say, I add the S for a reason. Building, of course, Canada, but building in a new way with First Nations. And this is really the first time we've had a signature piece of federal legislation that has at the heart of it economic growth for Indigenous peoples. And that's the possibility. Now the job for leadership, myself included, but I'm only one of many. The premiers, the leaders of the rights holders, as I say, the modern treaty leaders, to work with what do we want to do.
What in Mark Carney's mind is a major project that this country needs right now?
Well, so I'm going to answer that in a different way if you don't mind, which is that I don't have a preset notion on a specific project that we must do. But what we did in the legislation is sort of define the elements of, well, what does build a nation? And there's 5 elements, and one of them is, of course, it advances Canada's economic interests. It makes us stronger, makes us more resilient. And, we know because of the crisis coming from south of the border, that's one of the things we need to do. But secondly, and crucially, these are projects that are in the interests of Indigenous peoples, that are aligned with their interests. And that shows you what the process has to be, because it has to come up from those groups. And the third big thing, the third big element that is very clearly in the legislation and will be in the approach, is that it aligns with the country's climate goals, so that it's moving us, the projects are moving us forward. Now, not every project will move us forward as much as other projects, but I'll give you an example, and I'm fresh from, as you may know, from meeting with the premiers, the first ministers yesterday, including the premier of the Northwest Territories, who very kindly came from that to be here today. And one of the things we talked about was raised by the premier of BC and the premier of Yukon, is how can they, and that what they want to do is connect the hydro grid, so the zero emission grid from BC into the Yukon, and in doing so, obviously it brings power to homes and people there, and clean power. But what it also does is it creates the possibility to develop critical mineral deposits, to diversify our economy, to give longer term jobs. And there's a series of projects that are linked in there. We're in the Northwest Territories. I'll give another example. Again, doesn't come from us. I'm going to hear about this, I'm sure, from the leaders of Inuit Nunagat tomorrow, which is Grays Bay Point. So this, for those who aren't familiar with it, is in Nunavut, Grays Bay. It is a potential new port, but the key thing about the port is it links and opens up opportunity in Nunavut, but as well in the Northwest Territories for economic development, for links and transportation corridor up into that. It creates the possibility that we build new relationships with Europeans, which provides some diversification from our exposure to the Americans. It's a very exciting project. Now, we will potentially support that, provided it has the full support of the Indigenous peoples all the way along the corridor. It seems to have a lot of support, but we've got to make sure that it's there, provided that we can see the broader economic benefits. We don't want to build a port and nothing flows through it, and that we get some private sector money to make sure that it's not just the Canadian taxpayer that's paying.
And part 2 of that interview will air tomorrow on our Friday newscast in the evening. Our Truth in Politics panel is up next to talk about Bill C-5, including those meetings between chiefs and the Prime Minister and the premiers. We'll be right back. Welcome back. A northern pipeline improving the rail line connecting to Hudson's Bay to the prairies, expedited critical mineral mining, all on the table with the new One Canadian Economy Act and Ontario's Bill 5. Great for Canada, but perhaps with US tariffs on the horizon. But how does all of this affect First Nation rights? Our Truth in Politics panel will dig into this. Jennifer Leywitz is back. She is a CEO with Pasquale Strategies, and Winnipeg Free Press columnist Neegon Sinclair is here too. Welcome back, Jennifer and Neegon. Jennifer, let's start with you. Bill C-5 got royal assent on June 26th, very quickly, we might add, but the federal government did not meet with their First Nation leaders until last week in Gatineau, Quebec, when the bill is already a done deal. What do you make of that?
I think we're seeing a government now that just wants to move ahead with resource development and, investment into this country and our economy. I think it's rather unfortunate that it happened as quickly as it did. I think, First Nations were not given the proper opportunity to understand fully what this bill meant and also what their position was going to be on it. Seeing all of our people, flock to Ottawa after the bill has already received royal assent just seems very redundant and it's already passed. So at this point, our opportunity to convene a committee, to meet with ministers, make those amendments that are necessary, but also for us at our end as well to come together and decide what position we're actually going to take on this. It seemed rushed. It seemed like there wasn't much consultation. Actually, I feel comfortable saying there wasn't any consultation. And this is just a prime example of how, government needs to be coming to the table. We are in a nation-to-nation relationship, and unfortunately that did not happen.
Neegon, the meeting between the Prime Minister and chiefs was closed to the media. Only a few select stakeholders were allowed in, but APTN National News obtained an hour and 18-minute audio recording of it all. You've heard the recording, Neegon. What do you make of that, what was said in that meeting?
Well, it's certainly evident that during closed-door meetings, I guess we shouldn't be surprised that there are certain things that are said or promises that are made. And one of the most interesting promises out of that recording was that the Prime Minister said to chiefs that if the provinces won't come on board, he will bring them on board. What he said is bring them up. That is certainly a messaging that the Premier's meeting later might have been more interested to hear from, because it certainly creates a sort of situation in which the premiers will have to face a prime minister who is going to be moving very quickly, as Jen pointed out. And if the provinces want to drag their feet, or if they want to, in the case of Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew, consider Indigenous rights, they're going to be facing off against a federal agenda that's going to want to move very quickly. And so I think there's a communication difference that we will need to keep an eye on in the future.
Pipelines, logging projects, railroads, interprovincial trade, critical minerals, the Ring of Fire, all of that fast track with the Prime Minister and the premiers telling the original people of the continent, don't worry, we can still talk. But it would seem there was no mention of being equal partners with big government and big business. Your takeaway on that, Jennifer?
I think that's one of the biggest, concerns about all of this, is that it's really black and white when it comes to whether or not First Nations or, Indigenous people in general support research development in this country. It's already a contentious issue that most people have a hard time dissecting on what stand to take on it. But at the end of the day, if there are going to be these projects and we are going to be involved in them, we cannot be coming to the table and just looking for scraps. It's not, okay, everyone make these business deals, everybody make the plans for these investments, and then at the end we look at the Indigenous people and decide whether or not they want to be part of it, but then we're begging for the bottom of the barrel. If you are going to be putting projects in any type of industry through our traditional territories across this country, we need to be equal partners, and not just equal partners in terms of investment and what those business opportunities look like, but equal partners in terms of the environmental impacts and whether or not we're brought to the table to have those discussions about what impacts it could have on our lands, and who knows our lands better than our own people. And it's why I keep saying that nations need to get to the table and start, building out their due to consult protocols, mapping out their traditional territories, and, having those discussions about free, prior, and informed consent.
Back to you, Nigan. What do you think of the rhetoric Carney and the premiers are using? Words like providing services, Ontario Premier Ford telling chiefs to take the money. Premiers say we are here to listen. Nothing in terms of treaty rights or original jurisdiction or title in the context of international law.
All very transactional. I think there's a historical misunderstanding around treaty as being these kinds of transactional relationships. You give one thing, I give another. Not about living together, co-governing, sharing the land, sharing resources, and working together towards the better good for all people. And I think that that's a general misunderstanding of treaty that unfortunately is embodied by the leaders who are most often voted in by people who may not always understand treaty either. It's a kind of a national education problem, an epidemic of misunderstanding, as it were. What we've got really here is we've got premiers who want to move quickly, who see a lot of economic benefit and opportunity, and they're not that interested in talking about spirit and intent. They're not that interested in talking about sharing. They're not that interested in talking about what it really means to be able to evoke and fulfill those agreements that are the legal foundation of the country or the Constitution. I mean, the Constitution is supposed to be about people working together from the very beginning of these laws, not at the very tail end of how much do we pay you. It's supposed to be about working together from the very outset for the betterment of all. And one of the side benefits to all of this, of course, is that when we do fulfill the treaties, we will save the land. We will give air, we will have fresh food to eat, clean water to drink. And I think Canadians need to understand that.
Let's wrap this part of the discussion for now and move on to the podcast. We have photo of the day and weather up next. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Time now for our photo of the day. An amazing photo of a humpback whale breaching in the Salish Sea just south of Vancouver Island. Malachi Aaron captured this moment while out on a wildlife tour. Thanks for sharing, Malachi. If you would like to be featured as our photo of the day, send us your pictures to share at aptn.ca. Time now to take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. On the east, St. John's 22 in showers, Halifax partly cloudy and 27. Cartwright 21, Le Grand River 20 in rain. Montreal 27 in showers there, Quebec City 26. 31 in Toronto, Sarnia 27. Sioux Lookout 26, Wawa 21. 20 in Churchill and showers there, Thompson 22. 30 in Winnipeg, 28 in Princess Harbour. 28 in Swift Current, Regina showers and 31. Rain in La Ronge at 24, Buffalo Narrows 23. Showers in Grand Prairie at 22, High Level 23. 28 in Medicine Hat, Calgary 19. Campbell River 21, Kamloops 23. 21 in Prince George, Prince Rupert showers and 15. 20 in Watson Lake, rain in Mayo at 19. Sunny in Fort Simpson at 22, Trout Lake 23. We had such a jam-packed show. That's your evening newscast for this Thursday. Our daytime newscast is back again tomorrow at 12 p.m. Winnipeg time. Please join us then. From our HQ in Winnipeg, Kwana Hai Hai Miigwech for watching, and we'll see you again next day.